You're listening to Mature Allure. Here, we chat about self care, relationships, careers, and all the things living a mature life includes. I'm your host, Sherry O. Welcome.
Get out the way. Who got a watch? Who got the time? I'm raising the clock. Even in my feelings, grind don't stop. Got big.
Today's guest is Lisa Rogers Cherry. She's a financial expert and author. Welcome to Mature Allure, Lisa.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm happy you're here. Please introduce yourself.
My name is Lisa Rogers Cherry. I'm a financial consultant, financial literacy coach, author, mom, lots of things. I graduated from Spelman College, undergrad. I graduated from University of Florida College of Law, and I've been working in community development for 25 years now. And that's how I got started with the financial literacy and community development, consulting, and helping first-time home buyers.
Oh, that's awesome. Are you still in the Atlanta area?
No, I'm in South Florida.
Oh, okay. I used to live in South Florida. Very familiar with it.
Yay! It's nice and hot today.
Oh, I'm so sure. Well, tell us a little bit about your book. You have a book out. It is called Lifting the Burdens of Debt, a helpful guide to getting your debts paid and your life back on track.
I started doing the community development. I was executive director of the CDC, and I helped first-time home buyers. And what my boss wanted to do was to redevelop the neighborhood. And so we started building single-family affordable homes. And what we found, Sherry, was that most of the clients that we were trying to work with, they couldn't qualify because they had credit issues, they didn't have enough money saved. So I had to start over and go get certified in credit counseling so that I could help them know how much money they needed to save, help them clear their credit issues, help them to do everything that they needed to do in the process. So we started helping them. We had a hand-holding program which was phenomenal. It was called H2H, from homeless to home ownership, where we helped individuals become homeowners. Not everybody wanted to become a homeowner, but they wanted to learn about it, to know if they could and what they needed to do. Some of the church members, the CDC that I worked for was started by a church, and some of the church members wanted their children to become homeowners, their families, and some had been renters for years. So a lot of them just took the classes to learn what they needed to do. So we helped them get educated. We helped them to start savings accounts. We identified 6 banks that worked with us that had in the past been denying people loans, individuals that looked like us, loans because of their credit scores, because they didn't have enough money saved, because they had issues. And those banks worked with us to create programs to help first-time home buyers. So we worked with them, we helped them to save, we helped them to budget, we helped them to do all the things in the process. And then I got married, and then my husband decided he wanted me to become a stay-at-home mom. So I wrote my book as a gift to them because I felt like I was leaving them after we had started the process. We had started, building up houses in the community. I had gotten some people into home ownership, but then I was coming home to stay, to become a stay-at-home mom. And so I wrote the book as my gift to them, to teach them how to budget, to continue to teach them and to encourage them to save, to teach them not to lend money to family and friends. Different little things that we take for granted, like common sense things that aren't so common. So the book started selling, and I would sell it. It was written for my clients, but it started selling at different churches, and word of mouth, it spread. And next thing I knew, I was at the White House with my book. I did a forum right after Hurricane Katrina on economic development, helping people to save and rebuild their lives after, a catastrophe. What do you do? Because there's nothing that tells you, hey, I've lost everything. How do you rebuild from this? If you have no job, what do you do? If you have no savings, what do you do? So it just spread like wildfire, and it went from church to church, and I started doing speaking engagements, and
And went from there. So it's a book and a workbook, right? Is there
right.
work?
A
Okay, so
lot of
people can actually work in it and follow along and okay.
Exactly. A lot of people didn't really want to read. They wanted the worksheets, they wanted to do the budgeting forms, they wanted to know the steps, the quick and easy steps, so they could just do the pages and be done. You know, some people wanted to read, some people didn't want to take the time to read. They just wanted the quick and dirty. What do I need to do? If I'm in a jam, what do I need to do? You know, how do I save? How do I plan for this? How do I set goals? All of that's in the book.
So you mentioned earlier, you mentioned that you worked with banks who had previously denied people. And so after working through a program, these banks were willing to work with you to help people get where they needed to go. So that's a really good point to bring out, because some people think, oh, they just denied me just because.
And
But there's a
lot of the
method to the
banks-
madness.
A lot of the banks, Sherry, have CRA. All of the banks have CRA requirements. So what some of the banks did that we were working with, they created special programs for first-time home buyers. I mean, they would have lower interest rates. They would have lower down payments, down payment assistance programs to help the individuals who are trying to become homeowners. So
Oh, okay. Well, see, that's good. That's good to know. So can you define financial freedom for
to
us?
me, to me, financial freedom means to be able to make life decisions without being stressed out about the financial fallout as a result of those decisions. When you have no debt, money in the bank, and investments for future, then you can have financial freedom. You can breathe. You can take a trip. You know, your friends call and say, "Hey, let's go to the Bahamas," and you're like, "No, wait, I don't have enough. I have to do this. I have to do that." If you have financial freedom, you say, "Okay, when are we going?" When you've planned ahead, when you've saved, when you have your retirement accounts, you know, everything lined up, that's financial freedom to me. That's, you know, it feels good not to worry, not to stress, not to think about it.
So what should people consider or be considering when they're trying to go debt free, or their plan is to be debt free?
First thing I tell my clients to do is to set goals. When you're thinking about, oh my God, I have all this debt, you have to make a plan. You have to have a plan in hand, or else you're just going to be sort of chasing your tail. I like to make a list. When my clients come to me, I tell them, first thing, let's make a list of everybody you owe. I know you don't want to think about it, but make a list of everybody, from the electricity to your rent, mortgage, the car, whatever. Everybody you owe, every credit card. I mean, it may be 10 or 20, but every single one. And write them out, make a list of everybody you owe, and then get a plan. Decide, okay, am I going to pay the biggest one? Usually I tell them, pay a few small ones so you can check it off. You know, you can have some successes. And then look at the credit cards with the highest interest rate. You want to pay those off first because they're eating up the biggest amount of money. And a lot of people will have money saved, but they have 4 or 5 credit cards and they're making less money in their savings because the interest rate isn't that great. So it's better to pay off the debt with the higher interest rate so you can get that behind you. And initially, when I bought my first house, I had a lot of money in savings, but I had a lot of credit because when I was in college, I got a lot of credit cards, which is mistake number one. I tell my clients you need two credit cards. That's it. I mean, if you have more, there's a way that I tell you, you know, don't just close everything out because you don't want to ruin your credit score. But 2, when my kids are in school, 2, that's it. You don't need 10 gas cards, 10 shopping store cards. You don't need 10 visas. You don't. And I remember a time when people used to have several different cards and they would give you 0 interest rate for like 6 months, and people would pay off one and pay off the other and swap and go back and forth, and then it catches up with you because something happens, life happens, and then you have extra debt that pops up that's unexpected, and then you're like, uh-oh.
I
Then
know
you
that
have
story.
2 cards.
I know that story.
Cards, you know, with credit that you can't pay off.
Yeah.
And then you have the interest rates go back up after a while, and you're paying 20-30% interest on a credit card, which is not good.
Yeah.
So my strategy is to have a plan. Make your list, check them off, get an extra job if you need to. When I started telling you, when I bought my first house, I had money saved, But the bank didn't want me to touch my savings. They wanted me to keep my savings, but pay off the credit cards. And I didn't have a whole lot. I mean, maybe 3,000 that I would use for trips and stuff. So I just got a part-time job dedicated to just paying those credit cards off. And
Well,
I
since
worked and paid them off.
so since you're mentioning the credit cards, how much credit is okay to have?
Well, it depends. I mean, it depends on what you're trying to do. Um, when you're applying for a house, there's a certain amount that you can have. If you're trying be in a certain bracket, then there's a
Hmm.
certain. It just depends on what you're trying to
Okay.
do, and you don't want to be overextended. That can be a problem when you're trying to buy a house. That's when it's a
Yeah.
bad thing to have too much credit because the banks believe you can charge up these cards after you get into your home and you may not be able to pay your mortgage, which is a problem. That's
Hadn't thought
when
about that.
having too much credit is a problem. I mean, because most people are like, oh, what's the big deal? You can have 10 credit cards. The problem comes is when you have the 10 credit cards and they're all maxed out or they all have, you know, a charge on them or charges on them. And what I teach my clients and my kids is to pay off, don't use more than 1/3 of the credit cards. That's
I was
when you
going to ask.
start getting into trouble. When you use more than 1/3 of the balance, then
Okay.
that becomes an issue.
Okay, I was going to ask. I was going to ask that. That's a good point. Um, so why is it important to have a budget? I mean, people say, "Oh yeah, budget." It's kind of thrown around, but
Yes,
tell me
I'm the
about it.
budget queen. So I tell people if you have $1 or $1 million, it's critical to have a budget because it's a spending plan. It kind of keeps you in line and it just guides you. You know how much you can afford to spend, you know what's coming, especially when you have recurring issues like your rent, your mortgage, your light bill, the things that come every month. And then you're gonna have incidentals, things, a flat tire may happen, or your refrigerator breaks, or your window breaks. The emergencies that come that you haven't planned for can totally throw your budget out of line if you don't have any extra saved. So the budget is just your income minus your expenses that gives you the bottom line. And the only problem comes when the bottom line is a negative number. And sometimes that happens because
Yeah.
you haven't planned ahead. So
Yeah. So, what should somebody consider or be thinking about if they're looking at making a big purchase like a house, car, land, even
once
rental property?
once again, I go back to the plan. If you know that you would like to buy a house, you plan for it. You don't just wake up and go, "Oh, I'm going to buy a house today." You set aside money because you're probably going to have a down payment unless you're in a program that doesn't require a down payment. But you still want to have money. And most of the financial experts say 6 months of savings, 6 months of your income saved somewhere. And that's the going rate of what they call successful. If you're successfully saving, you have at least 6 months, so that if something happens, like the pandemic, caught all of us by surprise.
Yeah.
Nobody expected the pandemic, and we had no idea it was going to last 2 years.
Yeah.
I mean, it's even spilling over into now, where some people haven't gone back to full-time employment yet.
Yeah.
So if something should happen, normally we say 6 months. So, I mean, since the pandemic, I would say a year of savings because you don't know. You
Yeah.
just don't know, what could happen. And realistically speaking, you want to have something stashed away for a rainy day, for a pandemic, for an emergency, for whatever may happen, because something is going to happen.
Yeah, it always does. Something always happens. What if you're a single parent or grandparents raising children, or even someone in midlife starting a new family? What should they be considering when creating a budget?
I'd say always stash away extra for emergencies. I mean, because with kids, things happen. Somebody falls and breaks something. I mean, you have insurance, but you still need extra because
Yeah.
when you go to the emergency room, you have to pay. If you, whatever, save for the unexpected, and that's a big thing. A lot of times the grandmas, are helping out their granddaughter, grandson, whatever, and they're stuck and they don't have the extra. They have just enough on their fixed income,
Yeah.
so it's hard, but if possible, when you can, when you get a stimulus check, when you get your income tax check, or whatever you get, to stash half of it away. Don't spend it on the luxuries because there may be an emergency.
So then, what about retirement? When I know, this is Mature Allure. So majority of the people who listen to Mature Allure are mature. When should people start thinking about retirement plans? And if they don't have one when they're, let's say, over 50, what should they do?
When I started my first day of work, when I filled out the application and I got the job and I started filling out the paperwork for my income tax, how much income tax was to be taken out, I filled out something that first day about retirement. I mean, from day one, if you can,
Yeah.
start then. What I'm telling my daughter who's about to start working, start now. Now, for the 50-year-olds, 40-year-olds who didn't do that, start now. It's still not too late. Whatever check you get, take a percentage of that, put it in an IRA. You can do, I think, up to 7,000, something like that, in an IRA. That's, not really taxable. So that's a good thing. But start somewhere. Or some of my friends have decided they're not going to retire, Sherry. They're just going to work until the end. And I think in our generation, more people are doing that than before. In our parents and grandparents, they talked about retirement and planning on retiring. But a lot of people now are entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And they have 3 and 4 careers or 3 and 4 streams of income. So retirement isn't really on the table.
And the thing about it is, and I say this almost with every person I interview, the age comes up and how this generation's different, how than our parents and our grandparents were. Like you said, think about back in the day, you gotta have retirement. You gotta have, yes, you need that. But now people are just working and hustling and doing what they
And
do.
starting new companies at
Starting-
60.
Yes, exactly.
So-
So that's a really good point. That's a really good point.
Yeah, so
So
it's
then
not as
college.
pressing.
Yeah, it's not as pressing. You want to keep going. So then college, because college gets expensive with every year. It's not like, a couple years go by, college goes up. No, college is expensive every year. What advice would you give somebody, of course, who has children going to college or in
That's
college?
me. I have a son in college. My daughter just graduated. And I preach applying for scholarships. My daughter applied weekly for scholarships. And what we found with both of my kids were some of the scholarships that they applied for, there were only like 2 or 3 people applying for it. There are a lot of applications that are not being applied for, scholarships. People are saying, please apply. There's money that's not being spent, that's still on the table. There are all kinds of scholarships. One of the popular ones is UNCF.org. They have new scholarships weekly.
Wow.
So I tell people, apply. There's lots of money available. And I think a lot of people apply for the same ones, but there's scholarships for virtually anything. Long hair, being from Florida, being a football player, liking mangoes. There's scholarships for anything you can think of.
And the dollar amounts. That money adds up. It might
Exactly.
seem like a $300 scholarship isn't a lot, but that can pay for a book or two. And
And when you don't have anything, that $300 check comes when it hits. It's
Yeah.
a good time. So and no scholarship is too small. The $100, $300, they all add up. And
they do.
I know kids who have applied and paid their whole tuition, everything, tuition, room and board, everything with scholarships. So trust me, I preach scholarships, I teach scholarships. Go to the financial aid office, get to know your financial aid advisors, talk to them, let them know who you are, keep your grades up, and apply.
Yeah, and I think the same would apply too if you're at around our age right now, and maybe you're looking to get some kind of college degree or education.
And
I mean, like you said,
they have money for returning students.
yep.
So there's money for pretty much every situation, because a lot of people who have gone before us were in our shoes, whether you returned, whether you want to go back to med school or law school or whatever, there's money available.
Yep. Well, we talked about credit earlier. How important is it? I mean, there are people who believe in no credit cards, but how important is credit?
I think credit is critical, especially now, because some jobs and insurance companies are requiring you to fill out applications and share your credit information. I mean, before it wasn't a big deal, but now some jobs are denying you if you have bad credit. So
Wow.
I would definitely tune in. You know, some people are like, I don't care about my credit. You should, because you're paying more. I mean, even if you buy a car, people don't really understand that the interest rate that they pay will cause them to pay $30,000, $40,000 more for the same car if they have, bad credit versus if they have great credit score where the interest rate is lower.
Yeah.
So,
So then that brings up this point. Is it better credit union versus bank? Is it a thing?
it depends. I mean, I think each situation is different. I've used a credit union for certain things, and I think the relationships you build with credit unions are sometimes better, and they will extend you, I think, more leeway than some
Grace.
banks. Yeah, some grace, because they know, they've known you, you've been here, you have a history with them, versus some banks, which are like, this is the bottom line, this is the same, across the board. And of course, you can build rapport with your bankers also, but it just depends. I think in certain situations, the credit unions are a little bit more lenient because of the rapport and the history. So,
Well, lastly, and I know you mentioned saving and what is your one key piece of advice, financial advice, that people should consider when going debt free?
I think paying off your credit cards, and I said before, don't have too many credit cards, don't have too much credit. I think that's one of the key things that people mess up with, because even in college, when you get to college, they will give you a credit card for a beach towel. Say, hey, you want this beach towel? Sign up for this credit card. Or a mug or a cup or something. And you're not looking at the fact that they're charging you 19% interest rate. You're paying $30 or $50 for that beach towel or whatever it is. A lot of people get caught up with credit cards. Credit cards can be wonderful. I mean, if you need something in a pinch, it's great. But pay it off as soon as you can. And don't just pay the minimum on your credit cards, or else you're going to be paying way more than for whatever you paid for. So I would say manage your credit. Try
Okay.
your best to keep your credit good.
Okay. Well, if someone wanted to get in touch with you, how would they go about doing that? Your social included, and also how they can get the book or the workbook.
Everything is on my website, LisaRogersCherry.com, and I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, Lisa Rogers Cherry Writes on Facebook, and Lisa Rogers Cherry on Instagram. So I do Financial Tip Friday every Friday, and I try to help you, avoid fraud, scams, whatever pops up, whatever's popular that I see during the week, I'm going to give you a tip about it on Friday. So LisaRogersCherry.com is the best way.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Lisa, for, checking in with Mature Allure, and we are so happy that you did. You gave great advice. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Sherry. Anytime. I'm glad to meet
All right.
you.
Nice to meet you, too.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Mature Allure. For more information about us, visit matureallure.net and get social with us on Instagram and YouTube at mature.allure, Facebook at @formatureallure, and Twitter at @mature_allure. Till next time, we encourage you to stay positive, embrace who you are at every stage of your life, and always tap into your mature allure.